black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
The slave went free, stood a brief moment in the sun, then moved back again toward slavery. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote those words. This is a story of how it happened. What do you call it when the government that freed you sells you back? 1865, emancipation. 1867, 700,000 black men registered to vote. 1868, the South's first public schools. 1870, black senators in Congress. Over 1,500 black office holders across the South. The most democratic governments the region had ever seen, all of it built in 12 years. 12 years. That's how long black freedom lasted before America traded it away. Part 1. The coups. South Carolina, 1876. Martin Gary wrote the plan. An actual written document distributed to every county. Organize red shirt rifle clubs, disrupt Republican meetings, intimidate black voters, use force without hesitation. The plan was not secret, it was public. They called it the Edgefield Plan. The Democratic Party strategy resolution. Carry the election peaceably if we can, forcibly if we must. Red shirts marched through Columbia in formation, open, armed. 800 men attacked the black militia at Hamburg. Prisoners executed. At Ellington, another massacre. Then the election. More votes counted than registered voters. The surplus, uniformly Democratic. The fraud was visible in the raw numbers. They didn't need to hide it. They knew no one would stop them. Wade Hampton was installed as governor. The man the coup put in power was celebrated as a savior for over a century. A statue on horseback at the State House. Louisiana. The White League seized the state government by force in 1874. The Battle of Liberty Place. Armed men overthrew the elected government in New Orleans. Federal troops restored it, but the message was sent. The paramilitaries would keep coming until the troops left. A black political leader in South Carolina said, "We gave them our blood in the war. We gave them our votes in the peace. We gave them our loyalty in every election. And when they had used us to keep themselves in power, they traded us away for the presidency. We were the currency of the transaction." Part 2. The deal. What was black freedom worth? Exactly the price of a presidency. The election of 1876. Tilden versus Hayes. 20 disputed electoral votes from Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida. The disputes all caused by the same thing, the systematic suppression of black Republican votes through violence and fraud. The constitutional mechanism for resolving it was unclear. The nation teetered on the edge of a second civil war. The Wormley House Hotel, Washington, D.C., owned by James Wormley, a prominent black businessman. In his hotel, representatives of the Hayes campaign met with Southern Democrats. The deal: accept Hayes as president. In return, withdraw the troops. Abandon Louisiana. Abandon South Carolina. Let the coup stand. 4 million black people trade for the White House. The president has deserted us. The party of Lincoln has deserted us. The government has deserted us. We are left to the mercy of men who have no mercy. What shall we do? Where shall we go? Who will speak for us now? After the troops withdrew. Between 1877 and 1950, at least 4,000 black people were lynched in the South. The real number is higher. Without federal oversight, extra-legal violence became the law. The cascade after 1877.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson. I'd like to welcome you to the current discussion that I will be having on this show during this period of time. For those of you who are new to the Umoja Circle, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. So many of my topics that I do, and I have been doing this for a little bit over 30 years, I've been doing this show, and I try to fill in some of the gaps that I'm seeing in my day-to-day lives, what I hear on the internet, what I hear a lot of our young brothers and sisters when they have the discussion when it comes to race or what it is, American history or black history. And there's a lot of confusion. So when I do my shows, I try to straighten those discussions. One of the things that, and what I'm doing on this show, this is the third part of a four-part series that I've been doing based on a book that you see right here. This book was written by W.E.B. Du Bois called Black Reconstruction. It was written in 1935, and this W.E.B. Du Bois is one of our greatest minds. And when you hear these discussions today, I think that a lot of people don't recognize that we as people of African descent have our scholars. We have our great minds. We only are not just people who are reactive. We are thinkers. And we've had hundreds of years of experience. And we understand who we are and how we fit into this society called America. And a lot of times, our perspective goes ignored by the, say, white majority. For example, we knew what was going to happen if we let MAGA in, the Republican Party, the way it is now, into office in 2024. We tried to warn people. We understood what was going to be in store for us. So now, 2 years later, almost 2 years later in 2026, and we're seeing the results of that and the horrors of that. Again, black people have, and there's a reason we understand that, because we have a history of dealing with authoritarianism. That doesn't sound correct based on the type of history that you're taught in school. If you happen to be white or even black people in America, you're taught that this is the land of the free and the home of the brave. But if you read books like this book here, that was written again in 1935 by this great scholar, W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the first black men to get his PhD at Harvard University. The second one was, of course, Carter G. Woodson. But this man dedicated his life. Because when I hear about people who are in the spotlight, who are, we have these stars and these celebrities, but he was an intellectual celebrity, but he paid the price, just like many of our other great black scholars who spoke truth to power, okay? So I want to start, this is the third on the series. With the video that you saw, you got an idea what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be, well, let me just say this. I've heard so many people, misguided young black men and women, who say that, who actually those who might have voted for the MAGA Republicans, who said that the Democratic Party was the party of enslavement, and it was the Democratic Party that was part of the Civil War. Yes, that was true in 1860, 1861. Okay, and the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln. True, in 1865. You did have radical Republicans who pushed forth the 13th, the 14th, the 15th Amendment. That is also true. You had these few radical Republicans like Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner of Massachusetts. Thaddeus Stevens was from Pennsylvania. Benjamin Wade. You had these radical Republicans who were allies who saw enslavement as a horror and did their best, but they were few and far between. But from 1865 to 1877, that was the part that we would call the Reconstruction era. I talked about that era more in depth in part 1 and part 2. But part 3, I'm going to deal with what was known, and some of you might have heard of it, some of you might not have heard of it, when the Republican Party betrayed us. And that's called the betrayal of 1877. So let's get started with this. I wrote this out to give you a little overview of what I will be talking about. I'm going to try to tie things in from the 1877 to today's MAGA movement during these two shows, part 3 and part 4, which will be the next one. I start off by saying what you're hearing in the news today, the Republican Party that wraps itself in Lincoln's memory died in the back rooms of 1877 when a disputed election was resolved by trading black freedom for white peace. Because they got tired, okay? The Thaddeus Stevenses and the Charles Sumners were old by 1877 and out of the Republican Party. Those new breeds of Republicans decided they were tired, okay? We just want our peace. And they started turning their backs towards what was fought for Civil War and all the struggles that was going on during that 12 years of Reconstruction when America had its opportunities. From the moment Rutherford B. Hayes secured the presidency, this was the 1876 presidential campaign that was going on between 1876 and his inauguration in 1877. By agreeing to withdraw the last federal troops from the South, Reconstruction's fragile protection collapsed. Black voters were abandoned to the redeemers. These are the people who burnt down cities, towns, and terrorized black people from voting. They are the Ku Klux Klan with the redeemers, to redeem the Old South. That's what that meant. And the Republicans, who were once the party of Lincoln, started changing or just ignored and gave black to these ex-Confederates to do that. And then we have Jim Crow began to rise on the graves of broken federal promises. So we were promised 40 acres and a mule. That was eliminated. We had over 2,000 people in federal position in political parties, black people who brought such things as public schools to the South. That was destroyed. So when people say Lincoln freed the slaves, okay, therefore Republicans are the party of black liberation, they are not just skipping a chapter of history, they are skipping the moment when that very party chose national reconciliation with the former enemy, with the former traitors of the Confederacy over the lives, votes, and lands of the very black people who had made the emancipation meaningful. And the 200,000 black men who fought in that Civil War. We were not given our rights, we fought, and many of us died for that. And we were betrayed. That's the 1877 betrayal when Rutherford B. Hayes became president, Republican, and in order for him to do that, the troops were taken out and we were left hanging to the vengeance of the redeemers of the old Confederacy. Let's go on. This is the book. This is the book you should have. A book that was written in 1935 that I'll be basing everything that you'll be hearing about. This great scholar saw this back in 1935. Let's go on to the next. Okay, what that book was about is a groundbreaking historical analysis challenging racist narrative of post-Civil War era, examining African Americans' role in reconstructed democracy and confronting white supremacist backlash from around 1860 to 1880. A time during the Civil War, which I talked about in part 1 and part 2, to the 1880s, but I'm going to take these next couple of shows into today, the 21st century, and 2026. Let's go on to the next. Dubois' prophecy. Okay, he wrote this in 1935. Black Reconstruction as today's mirror. Okay, and he prophesied what was going on right now because he saw the patterns. There was always going to be white backlash for any gains that black people have gained. And he talks about this and he breaks it down in this book. In 1935, Du Bois argued that Reconstruction was an attempt to reconstruct democracy on the basis of black labor and black citizenship. That's the 14th Amendment of this country, because we were a non-compensated working force as enslaved people. The 14th Amendment gave us citizenship, and you're still hearing discussion of the birthright citizenship of the 14th Amendment today in the news of the 21st century with the MAGA who want to get rid of the 14th Amendment. Well, folks, it's the 14th Amendment that gave us our citizenship as black people. It was written for us to make up for what was said by Dred Scott in 1857 that said even if we're not citizens, so any kind of rights that we have is not obligated to any white person to accept. And it was the 14th Amendment that gave us our citizenship. What's going to happen to us if they get rid of the 14th Amendment? You didn't think about that. It had nothing to do with a lot of immigrants, even though a lot of immigrants have benefited from the 14th Amendment, well said, but the original 14th Amendment was written to give ex-enslaved people rights, birth rights, those who were born here enslaved, the rights as citizens. Once you take that away, then that's the slippery slope. He described the Civil War and Reconstruction as a struggle between abolition democracy and white supremacist counter-revolution determined to restore the oligarchy through terror, propaganda, and law. Oligarchs are who's running the show today. They were running the show back then. Who do you think were the planters? They were the oligarchs of the time, or the robber barons of the latter part of the 1800s, the early part of the 1900s, you know, the Gilded Age. So we've always dealt with that, but this is not what you're taught in school. We got this chronological thing, like things gotten better. You had the revolution, you had some issues in the early 1800s, then you had the Civil War, and things just got better and better and better. Wrong. There was always backslide. There was always this thing about race. The sin of America has always been the bloodline of America, and we got to face that truth. Even to this day, we're still dealing with that struggle. Let's go on to the next. Okay. Again, the Reconstruction Brief Promise, 1865 to 1877. 13, 14, and 15 Amendments abolished slavery, established birthright citizenship, and protect black male suffrage, black male voting, backed by federal troops. You see, that's the key thing. We were given this rights, but we had to be protected from the redeemers and those ex-Confederates who were forced to pass the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment in order to get back as into the Union after they betrayed the Union during the Civil War. So those radical Republicans like Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner, they were the ones that said, in order for you to become a part of the United States again, you better pass these things. And it didn't go over well with those in the South. So this is that's one of the last good things the Republican Party did for black people. These gentlemen, by the 1877, were gone. They were old, but they were fighting from the 1830s, 1840s, through the Civil War, and these were their last act. And this was given an opportunity to America to set things right. But again, the same people who voted for the MAGA folks today against their own interests did the same thing back in the 1870s. They went against the oath because they, as W.E.B. Du Bois said that they saw themselves as in the white caste. America is a caste system. White men on top and black and native people and others in the lower caste. Okay, and the payment of whiteness is what a lot of these folks who voted against their interests are always being conned to believe. Okay. For a dozen years, black voters, office holders, and communities grow under federal protection, a key word, federal troops protection, while white supremacist terrorists like the Ku Klux Klan, paramilitary redeemers seek to overturn those gains. So you always had this tensions between those of us who were black and those who were the backlash, okay? Those redeemers, those paramilitary, they're the same ones that exist to this day, maybe as Proud Boys, or who are joining the ICE, who were going after the immigrants, brown people, and others. But the same mentality of white supremacy, white man, DEI, all that kind of thought process was going on back then. Nothing new. Let's go on to the next. Okay, this is a little overview of Du Bois' analysis, 1860 to 1967, that's the Reconstruction era, attempt to build a multiracial abolitionist democracy based on black labor and leadership. 1870s to the 1930s, the counter-revolution installed Jim Crow, destroys black political power, divided labor by race. They're trying to do that today in 2026 with the Project 2025. All that had underlying all those policies is race, getting rid of civil servants. Majority of black people in federal jobs went when you had Elon Musk and Doge got rid of all those civil servant jobs, okay? And they talked about DEI. That's another the same old idea that white people or white men are better for these positions than these black people, okay? Same kind of mentality, in the 1870s, on to this very day. 1964 to 1980, the civil rights era, Du Bois warned and realized, okay, the oligarchy uses race to block egalitarian reforms, okay? It's still the rich, elite, white males who are using their money and wealth, just like the planters did, to push certain political, backed by the Republicans and for a long period of time, the Democrats, okay? 2000 to MAGA, persistent assault on multiracial democracy and the black vote. What has changed in all this time? Black people have been experiencing Make America Great Again. We had to deal with that. How can we deal with that? And when was America great? When you had this type of counter-revolutionary. And what a counter-revolution is, when you have a revolution, you have the bottom people, the people at the bottom who have revolts or do a revolution. They're like they did in Haiti, There was a revolution by the black enslaved people who overcome the landowners and the slaveholders. But a counter-revolution is those people who lost their power doing things to get that power back. Those on the top trying to do things to dismantle the gains of those who did the revolution at the bottom. And the white elites back in 1877, Republicans and Democrats who saw themselves as white. Now, there were individual white Americans, yes. I'm not saying there wasn't, but as the organization, as a group, the Republican Party basically turned its back on black people after the Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel J. Tilden's presidential campaign. And we've been suffering ever since. Let's go on to the next. See, I want to draw an unbroken line from the betrayal of 1877, the end of Reconstruction era in America, through Jim Crow and the Southern strategy, through Goldwater, Nixon, Reagan, all the way to modern MAGA movement. A line Du Bois foresaw when he wrote Black Reconstruction. It's in this book. Let's go on. In 1935, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote Black Reconstruction in America and did something unforgivable in the eyes of American ruling class. He told the truth, okay? He told the truth about who actually tried to build democracy in this country. He gave credit to those radical Reconstructionists. They were white individuals who did their best, but as a whole, the majority, the same way people got betrayed in 2024 to let MAGA in, it's still the majority of the white population saw themselves as not part of any type of Reconstruction. He told the truth about who destroyed that experiment. Let's go on to the next. For a brief moment after the Civil War, radical Republicans answered the question in a direction of justice. Okay, the Thaddeus Stevenses and the Benjamin Wades and those folks, passing the Reconstruction Amendment, sending federal troops to protect black voters, supporting black office holders across the South. Just like after World War II, American troops occupied Japan, occupied Germany for many years. Many bases still exist to this day. The same thing had to be done in the South to protect those newly freed enslaved people, okay? Federal troops were there. Let's go on to the next. But Du Bois tells us that this revolutionary moment was fragile. It was surrounded by hostile forces, former Confederates who wanted their old world back, northern capitalists who wanted stability and profit margin more than justice, and a nation increasingly tired of the Negro question and eager to get back to business as usual. Reconstruction, he wrote, was not just ended, it was overthrown. Okay? I don't know how many times I've heard today white fatigue talk about black fatigue, white people talk about black fatigue, all the black issues, why we always got to talk about this black thing, why we always got to bring up black issues, why we always got to bring up race. They were saying it back then. It wasn't black people, we just wanted to be left alone. It was your fellow white Americans who would not leave us alone, who could not stand to see us become equal with them because of the caste system. Because for hundreds of years prior, you had this system of society that said you were at the top of the hegemony, at the top of the caste system. And here we have these radical white people saying that you are now equal to us. Psychologically, a lot of white Americans could not deal with that back then, and a whole lot still today having that problem. That's why many people vote against their own interests today. They brought the mess that we're in right now with MAGA. Let's go on to the next. The overthrow has, as a date, that's the 1877, okay? The election of 1876 between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel J. Tilden was one of the most contested in U.S. history. To break the deadlock, leaders of both parties did what American politics has done for too many times. They cut a deal over black bodies without black voices in that room. Let's go on to the next. Hayes would get the presidency. That's the Republican, Rutherford B. Hayes, okay? So the Republican Party compromised. In return, Republicans agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South and effectively abandon enforcement of black civil rights and political rights. You must understand, there was a Civil Rights Act, wasn't only in 1964. It was in 1866 and 67, okay? There was an 1871 Civil Rights Act. That's what allowed black men to go to Congress, become senators. There were thousands of black people in federal jobs, but they did the exact same thing Elon Musk did in the January of 2025. Got rid of all these civil servants. It was a lot of other folks, but back then it was predominantly black people that were compromised, and then they gave them back to the ex-Confederates who were pissed off about losing their rights in the war. Let's go on to the next. When the troops left, it was no reconciliation. It was just open season for black people. In the vacuum that followed, white supremacist redeemer governments seized control of the southern states. In other words, the old Confederacy was back. Let's go on to the next. This is some, I would like to use facts. This was a Harper Weekly in 1877 talking about that, a political cartoon, characterizing this compromise as Tilden or blood, captioned with compromise indeed, okay? One more thing, then I'll stop here and we'll wait for the next show to continue this. It'll get interesting, folks. This is another Harper's Weekly that showed in 1877 showing President Hayes' withdrawal of U.S. troops from the South, ending Reconstruction. So at this moment, I'm gonna stop part 3, and we'll go on into part 4 and continue to show that, you know, the Republicans, they betrayed us. They betrayed us today, they betrayed us in 1877. So until next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye.